our fear comes from misunderstanding their nature, who they are, what they do. Yes, they're big, and yes, they're loud, and yes, they have a wonderful, very strong energy.
Hey, it's Jill from A Flash of Beauty. I'm going to be honest, I've been struggling with anxiety lately. It feels like every day is more overwhelming than the last. Like all my responsibilities and obligations just keep piling up. I mean, it feels like on a regular basis I'll be staring at my to-do list and then my heart starts racing. I can't catch my breath. It's like I can't even breathe. And the more I try to push through it and stay focused and work through my list, my mind wanders and I'm focusing on everything that could go wrong. What if I miss my deadlines? What if no one likes me? What if I screw up? And yeah, so eventually I'm in full-blown panic mode. And I've tried to manage my anxiety before. I've read self-help books, tried meditation apps, and attempted talking to friends about it. But sometimes it feels like nothing really helps. It's like I'm going in circles in this cycle of worry and fear, and I can't figure out how to break free. But here's the thing. I recently discovered that therapy might be the key to managing my anxiety. This video is sponsored by BetterHelp, an online therapy platform that makes it super easy to connect with a professional therapist who can help you work through whatever you're facing. With BetterHelp, you can get matched with a licensed therapist who has experience dealing with anxiety and stress. They have over 30,000 therapists to choose from, and every single one of them has a master's or doctorate degree and has spent over 3 years and 1,000 hours working with people just like you and me. And the best part? You can access your therapy sessions from the comfort of your own home. You don't have to worry about fitting appointments into crazy busy schedules or dealing with the stress of sitting in a waiting room. If you struggle with anxiety like I do, I highly recommend giving BetterHelp a try. It could be the first step towards a healthier, happier life. Go to betterhelp.com/Bigfoot Revealed or select @A Flash of Bigfoot at sign up for a special discount off your first month of therapy.
When I grew up, you didn't talk about Bigfoot or anything like that in public. And it was something that we could talk about amongst ourselves, but it wasn't something that everybody would talk about. Now in Oklahoma, you can just meet a lot of people who have either had an encounter or had family that knew about it, or they know somebody. So it's pretty widely talked about here in Oklahoma now. The first encounter I had that I know for sure of, I was 6 years old. I was at my grandmother's house. I was outside playing in the dirt, which I normally did. I had sticks and things gathered up, and I was just sitting there on the ground playing when I heard somebody walk up. I thought it was my grandmother, but when I looked up, there was a young male, juvenile, standing there looking at me, you know, and I looked at him for a little bit and we stared at each other. And, you know, I go back and try to think of what was really going through my mind. Was I just looking at him and saying, man, that's a really hairy kid? Or, you know, what was this? And pretty much I jumped up after he turned and walked away and went in and asked my grandmother, what was that? And all she said to me was, what do you think it was? And so at that point, she wanted me to think about it. She didn't want to put anything in my head. And then later, we began to talk about it, and she began to tell me things about them, things that she had known, you know, all her life. They were always around because I was always in the woods. Anytime I could get off and get into the woods, they were there. It wasn't like we had a one-on-one relationship or anything. It was like what my grandmother told me. There are neighbors, and as our neighbors, sometimes we see our neighbors, And, you know, sometimes we might interact with them and sometimes we don't. We just acknowledge sometimes that they're there, and other times we just go about our business too. And so that's basically what I've done all my life. She let me come up with the questions, and then we would talk about it. If I'd see something or hear something, she would tell me about it. But she always wanted my opinion first about what I was seeing or, you know, what I was hearing. And so she didn't put anything into my head other than, you know, she did say they are another us. That's what she called them. They're like us in ways, and they're not like us in ways, and that they are our neighbors, and we are to treat them with respect like we would any neighbor. I have his name, and I have seen him, yes, since then. So Rockene is the name of the one that I saw when I was 6. And we didn't have like a lifelong relationship. I didn't always live in that area. And when I moved here, he came back to this place, which is not all that far from where I had that first encounter. In the woods as a child, I was out there talking to everything. It didn't make any difference what it was. If it was them, if it was the crows, if it was the trees or whatever. And pretty much today I'm still, you know, doing what I did when I was a little girl. Indigo is a young male now. He was just a small juvenile the first when we started interacting together. He started coming around. I would see him when I would be walking, because I walked every day up and down the road, and then I had another path. I also had a bull mastiff at the time who grew up here with them pretty much around. So they even had a relationship between them two. One day when Watto and I were walking down the road, she was looking off to the other side of the road, and she was getting all excited, and I looked and looked and looked, and I couldn't see anything over there. And so I turned back around to see maybe if I'd get a glimpse of Indigo. And what I saw was this little rock come flying through the air and hit Watto at the base of the tail. And she jumped and turned back around, saw Indigo, and so it was like, okay, everything's good now, you know, and we finished our walk. Indigo and I have interacted in a lot of ways through the years. He greets me. I know when he's around, and now as what we would consider a young man, he's still around, and he still lets me know when he comes around. A lot of people talk about glyphs, which is a writing form with many things. It can be sticks or rocks or anything. There's communication there too. Communication doesn't just happen when we talk to somebody or we hear somebody talking. Communication comes in a lot of different ways, and sometimes it's just to let me know they've been around, and sometimes it has more of a purpose. I don't even document all I see, and thousands, I guess, through my life. They use kind of an X, and a lot of people think that X means keep out. But from what I've gathered through the years, X can mean friendship, it can mean a thank you, it can mean a connection. And he would use that maybe if I would be going to do something and I was out doing something, he would leave an X. One of the coolest ones he ever left was my grandson was here and he had got a Happy Meal. And you know, in the Happy Meals, they have a little packet that'll have apple slices in it. Well, he wanted to leave it out for Indigo as a gift. And so we put his little packet of apple slices out. And the next morning we got up and we went to check on it, and the packet was still there. It had been opened and half of them had been taken out. It was zipped closed again, it was closed up, and half were left. And with it was an X right underneath it. So it let me know that they are our friends and that they acknowledged what he did in a good way. You know, and that's interesting, that 50%, that goes back to what I call my 50-50 rule around here. And that's pretty much happened because of me growing watermelons one year, and whole watermelons were missing right at the point of them being ready. And I would go down every morning and check my watermelons, and at night I'd think, well, that one will be perfect in the morning. I'll get up, I'll go down, I'll cut it, and I'll eat it right there in the garden. And it just kept whole watermelons. I mean, anywhere from 30 to 50 pounds and more whole watermelons just gone. Coyotes will get in them, but they always leave such a mess, and deer will put a hoof in them, but they just roll them around. There was no sign of any watermelon at all until one morning I went down and I was like, I don't know what's going on here. And I was looking under the vines and there was a footprint. And I knew at that point who had been taking the watermelons. So I just turned to the woods and I said out loud, okay, here's how it's gonna go. You can have 50% of everything I grow, but you have to leave me 50% for my family. And up until today, they still practice the 50-50. And they did with those apple slices that my grandson had left. The family that I've interacted with consists of one I call Owl Caller. And the reason I call him Owl Caller is because he does that owl call a lot, and I'm not the only one who's experienced his owl call either. I've got stories about that. But the mother I called Moma. And the reason I call her Moma is because she makes this sound that says Moma, Moma. And so I just started calling her Moma. And the oldest of the siblings are Meridia, which is a girl, and then you have Indigo, and then you have Mr. Blue, who is Indigo's younger brother, and then Baby Girl. Baby Girl, I saw the year she was born. She was already up walking around and was over across the creek from me, and I was cutting briars, and I looked up and I thought, is that a stump? And so I kind of lowered my head because I didn't want, you know, to bother her or to scare her, and actually I was afraid she'd leave. But I would kind of look up every little bit, and there she was, this little square, dark-colored baby. And I was just, you know, like, oh my gosh, I wanted so much to say something, but I just honored that they were there watching me, and then went about my business, you know, doing what it was I was doing. I never want to jeopardize anything with them. They have chosen to do this with me. It wasn't anything I chose or did other than have respect for them and to let them live their lives as they choose to live them. A lot of people ask me about this chosen thing. I've been chosen. Actually, I think it translates more to We have lived a respectful existence through the years. I'm not special in any way as far as them choosing me, other than I do respect them. I have great respect for them and their lives and how they choose to live them. They know that. They've watched me my whole life, how I've acted in that, and I don't vary from that either. I mean, they have a right to live as they choose, the same as, we do. They definitely recognize a respectful person, a person who's respectful to the woods and to everything that's there. I know I hear people talk about all the time. They take trash bags with them when they go hiking or they go camping and they pick up trash. Yeah, that doesn't go unnoticed at all. But even more than that, they can read you before you ever say anything or do anything. They can read you and know what kind of person you are. And there again, it's their choice. If I had pushed and said, I want more, I want more, I want more, would I have had the interaction I've had? I wonder about that. I feel very blessed to have been a part of their world for how much I am a part of, their world. And I don't want to do anything that's, gonna disrespect. My grandmother always told us when we were growing up never to act ugly. If you act ugly, that's not a good thing. And I try to always remember I don't want to ever act ugly to anybody or anything. Because she must said years ago, you humans, you don't respect the air, you don't respect the water, you don't respect the earth, you don't respect each other. But the worst is you don't have any respect for yourself. And if you have respect for yourself, truly, you're not going to go around disrespecting other things and people. She had Cherokee blood, yes. She was not a tribal member. I always knew that from her from day one, but I'm very mixed blood. And actually, I've got more Scottish in me than I've got anything. But she always told me that you honor all the blood that you have. It doesn't make anything as far as what it is. If you disrespect any part of your blood, whatever it is, then you've disrespected all of it. So, it's about being comfortable with who I am. And I have people ask me too, do you think being Native gives you more of a chance to interact with them? No, I don't. I think respect. If you are a disrespectful Native person, if you're a disrespectful Scottish person, if you're disrespectful at all, your chances aren't that great that you are going to have the kind of encounters that you'd like to have. With them, when you talk about the wilderness or being in the woods, that's their home. That's where they live. And they are going to have respect for it, and they are going to keep it in a good way. And we have the opportunity to learn from that and to learn to be respectful of the woods. I don't know how many people I've talked to through the years who have said since they had an encounter and are spending more time in the woods, they are becoming more aware of how to take care of the woods. Now, if people ask me, well, do we need to set aside land for them? No. They will be fine whatever happens. We need to set aside land for ourselves. That's where it all comes down to. We need to be respectful for our life and for our Earth Mother. I mean, this is where we live, and this is what we need to be taking care of. Do they teach that to people? Oh, yeah. I've talked to too many people to not believe that they can help us see how it is. I mean, they chose to be here on this earth because they love this earth. They choose to be in physical form on this earth because they love living here. And they know that we humans, we hold the key to the destruction of the earth or the healing of the earth. So it's up to us. You know, one of the things I've told people for years that come to this and they want to learn about them and who they are and what they do and where they came from and so many questions, what I always tell them, if you really want to learn about them, you're going to have to look at yourself. You're going to have to change your paradigm of who you are. Who are you? And how do you live on this earth? So what we end up learning actually in this is that we learn about ourselves. We learn who we are and how we relate to things. And so what the teaching becomes is about us and not about them. In 2010, I had a drum workshop, and I didn't expect anything to happen other than for people to come together and have a good time and enjoy making a drum. Well, there was a man who came, I'll just call him Richard, and he had walked around, and I told him he could take photos and things of the woods and stuff. I mean, the one thing I know for sure is they're never going to be in a picture unless they choose to be. So I don't have a problem with that. Well, that night we were sitting around the fire, and as I do a lot, I just get up and walk off into the woods at night. And that particular night I had done that. They were off in the woods, and I came back. I didn't think that they would stay down there, but when I walked up, Richard got up and he walked up to me and he said, I just want to thank you for allowing me to come here and experience, you know, what I have. No, I haven't seen anything, and, you know, and now this is a man who had been in law enforcement of one kind or another most of his life. Wasn't quite sure about mind speak at all. He just didn't know. But he did, you know, have a good heart, a really good heart. So I told him, I said, come on, let's just go walk in the woods. So we took off to go down to the woods, and he stopped. And I thought, I didn't know what was going on, but he stopped for a minute. And then he moved away from me. And I thought, what's going on? Well, I just let it go, and we walked on down to the woods, and he had the experience of his life. I had nothing to do with it. It was totally something that they chose, but he got to view the family. And he has actually an audio of that happening. They don't seem to mind audio here, so I don't have a problem with it. I mean, audio really doesn't prove anything either, but it's just kind of cool. So we came on back to the house. He was blown away, and in that audio, you can hear his expression. You can just imagine how he looks as he's seeing this unfold. Well, when we got back up, he had told me, when we started out there, I had somebody ask me what was I doing with a gun in my pocket. And I said, ask you? And he said, yeah, in my mind. And he said, all I knew was I had to tell the truth. He said it was just something in me. So I began in my mind to tell this being that why I had it. And I didn't know he had a gun in his pocket. I might have asked him to leave it in his pickup, but it was part of what he stuck in his pocket or put on him every day of his life, and he didn't even think about it. So they knew he had a gun in his pocket. He answered right, and they told him to step away from me. And that's what he did. He stepped away from me. So that's what was going on that I didn't know, what was happening. You can talk to him now, and he'll tell you it was a life-changing experience. Fear left him, and a whole world opened up to him. That it's beyond what you can express in words. When something like that happens, it's I can't I can't put it into words. It's just really special. I've been from coast to coast. I have camped by myself with my dog. A lot of primitive camping, and most of my camping has been primitive camping. I've been in Georgia, I've been in the Poconos, I've been in South Dakota, Northern California, where Patty made her debut many years ago. I've been through Washington and Oregon and British Columbia, and I've had many encounters. Some of them nothing more than them just letting us know. Some of them even more, where I actually interacted with them. Most of them are pretty much like meeting somebody or being somewhere where you're not at home. But then when you come here, it's like this is home. This is family and neighbors around here. And that's a special thing. When I would go off somewhere, it was like maybe getting to meet somebody that they knew, or someone that was very similar, to them. So it's the same, but it's not the same. It's just like when you go somewhere to another place, yeah, No, I think they're all the same species. I think there are groups of people. There are races of people, or whatever. There's Italians and Scottish people, and all this other of humans, and they're the same. And they move around. And there was one here, actually the one that was on that Hi Guys audio, that is now in Washington.
Wow.
So, and he actually gave me his name, and now the people in there that he interacts with know he's there. So that's kind of cool too. I'll tell you what, I love Mount Hood. I've always said Mount Hood is my mountain. And I love the forest there, and spent a lot of time with a good friend of mine. She and I camped and hiked and was all over that area. I loved it. I've been into the Three Sisters area. I love that too. I've been in Southern Oregon. I love that. I've been all over Washington State and up into British Columbia. Camped north of Willow Creek at Elk Meadows. I believe we were 30 miles out from the nearest little bitty town, and we spent several days there primitive camping. Well, when you go to the woods, you're basically going to a place that puts you in a space where you can hear yourself. Most of the time we spend not listening to ourselves, even though we're saying a lot of things, we're not listening. I think some of the things that Kashima has helped me learn with my relationship with him is about who I want to be, how I want to be. And that even goes back to my grandmother and the things, she taught me. And both of my grandparents, they were wonderful. I had wonderful grandparents on both sides. I could say anything and it wasn't like it was shock value. It was just what I said. Um, but I've never used the word hate much. I was never taught that word. You didn't hear it much in my family. Um, and I would say stuff like, "Oh, I hate when I do that." If I would do something and, I'd go, "Why did I do that?" And we all pretty much do that. But Kashima stopped me one day and he said, "How do you feel when you use that word hate against yourself?" And I thought about it, and then I thought about how I felt when I said it, and it wasn't a good feeling. I wasn't out using it against everybody, but I was using it towards myself. And so he asked me if I would take that word from my vocabulary. So if you ever hear me say it, I'm saying on the inside, "Oops, I shouldn't have said that," because that's not in my vocabulary. And he asked me to let go of another word that I used. And that sounds kind of simplistic about, letting go of a word. But we humans love our words. Kashima told me that a long time ago. But it was to use the word old when I'm talking about myself. And it wasn't anything I'd really thought about, but I'd look in the mirror and I'd say, "Oh, woman, I don't know who you are." But, and he asked me, "How do you feel when you say that word?" Well, I'm addressing that I'm old. I'm using it kind of in a negative connotation when I look at myself in the mirror, because I don't look like I used to. And so he asked me to take that, using that in my vocabulary. So if you look at both of those words, what do? They put me in a place of being in a good way, not hating and not looking at something as old and not of value anymore. And the one thing that I've learned, everything in our world has value. Every person has value. And those are things that we need to hold close when we listen to somebody else relate a story that they're going to tell you about an encounter. We need to stop and think, this is their experience. And it doesn't make any difference if we believe it or don't believe it. But it's how we react to that person. Do we belittle them? Do we tell them they don't know what they're talking about? And this takes you past that place of looking at another person and judging who they are by what they say. And we have to be very, very careful about that. Another thing Kashima taught me was, I was in a situation that was kind of hard for me, and it dealt with a lot of disrespect towards me. And he told me, he said, "Don't judge something as good or bad. Look at it and ask yourself, am I compatible with that? And if I am not, just take myself from it. I don't have to go after anybody. I don't have to say bad things. I don't have to do anything but just take myself from it." And if we can get to that place, then it makes for a much more peaceful life for sure. Well, I have a lack of fear, maybe, probably more so than most, but then again, I was taught about them. I wasn't left out here to see a movie or a video or hear someone talk about them being chased or, whatever. So one of the things that we have to understand with them is our fear comes from misunderstanding their nature, who they are, what they do. Yes, they're big, and yes, they're loud, and yes, they have a wonderful, very strong energy when you get around them. You hear people talk about that a lot of times. Also, our perception, what we think, factors in to how we view an experience with them. If we don't know who they are, if we don't understand their ways, then we take something that's really not a threat or not aggression, but we make it that because that's our understanding. And I'll tell a little story about when I was camping one time and there was a young man there, and we had talked earlier in the day, and he said to me he really didn't know what they were. He was a little bit afraid because he didn't really know. Well, later that evening, we had a fire, and as I do, I got up from the fire and began to walk off down the road. And he asked me, he said, Miss Arla, can I walk with you? And I said, sure, come on, walk with me. So as we walked down the road, we heard heavy bipedal walking coming up close to the road, and there were a lot of cedars and brush and stuff, so you really couldn't see in there, but you could feel that he was there, and you very definitely heard him walking up. Well, the young man grabbed my arm and he said, "Are you afraid?" And I said, "No, I'm not afraid." And I looked at him and I said, "Are you afraid?" And he grabbed me and he said, "Yes." If you had taken a report of the encounter, my encounter and his encounter. My encounter was I got up from the fire, I walked off down the road, a large one, walked up and stood behind the cedars and the brush. His was something came up, it was huge, it was going to get me, whatever. And that's pretty much what he said. Now I go back to what he said during the day. I don't really know what these are. And yes, he was afraid. So his encounter actually was the same encounter I had, but because of what he believed and what he didn't know, he took it as something threatening when it really wasn't at all. So a lot of encounters where people feel like they're in danger, they really feel like they're in danger. But it's because they don't understand the nature of these people who live in our woods. And that's how we foresee everything that happens in our lives, is it's our perception of what life is. So many already believe that they're these monsters. I mean, you see it all the time. You can go on YouTube, you can watch movies, and they're all these big hairy monsters that are going to get you. And so that's already in your mind. And one of the things that I tell people, when you go to the woods and you're out there and you know that they're there and you're afraid, I tell them, start talking. Tell them who you are. Tell them why you're there. Just talk to them like you would anybody that you might want to get to know or know who they are. And if you can't get past your fear, it's pretty simple. Turn around and leave. Don't go until you can work through that fear. The same people who tell their stories of being in the woods, and then one comes to their deer stand or one comes to their tent. These people have been in deer stands forever. These people have been in tents forever. They've always been there. They haven't been harmed through the years. So why would they all of a sudden decide that they were going to harm? Well, with misunderstanding of aggression, we might take rock throwing as aggressive. I have never seen that to be the truth. Even when I was a little girl, I used to hide in the bushes and pitch rocks at people, and then they would turn around and try to see where that rock was coming from. I was hid. They're pretty much the same way. And the juveniles are the biggest pranksters of all. I mean, you have somebody camping and there's this rock throwing going on. Well, what are they doing in camp? Oh my gosh, there's a rock. Here came a rock. Did it hit you? Well, no. Well, I'm pretty sure that they could have hit you if they wanted to. But why would they? What would be the reason for them to do that? You know, when they call, they're big and they're loud, and it can sound threatening. They greet me with what I call a greeting grunt. I have had people say, oh my gosh, that's scary. When you hear that, aren't you afraid? No, they're just greeting me. They're just saying, hey, I'm here. So our perception of fear and what they're doing, now, will they bluff charge you? Oh yeah, they will, but they'll test you too. They'll do things that test you, that make you show who you really are. And that's the thing with guns too. I have a lot of people say, oh, don't take guns in the woods because you won't have an encounter. Well, that's not totally true. Who you are with that gun in a threatening situation will definitely stop an encounter. But the gun itself is irrelevant. It's who you are when you're put under pressure. Are you bluff charged? Are they just trying to see? Or is it one of their kids out there going, hey, watch this? You know, and I've seen that happen Indigo. Here, I have a good friend, Jonathan, who had come and stayed. Well, the first night Jonathan was here, he went out to go to the bathroom, and he's standing there, and Indigo charges him. Well, he says, I didn't know whether to stop and come in or just keep doing it. Well, Indigo was just playing with him. He was just testing and seeing. And they're very good at that, to test you. And it makes you show who you are. The smell that people attribute to them is not a continuous thing. It is something that they can do at will. Now, if you've been swimming and you're hot and sweaty in the summer and you got a lot of hair, you're going to stink. But normally, they do not smell like that. If they did, there would be areas where they are that would be reeking, and it's not. The same year that Jonathan was here, Blue, which is Indigo's younger brother, was sitting off a little ways from us into the trees, and he was doing this at will. And it was literally gagging us. We were like, stop, stop. And he would stop, and then we'd go talking, and he would do it again. So it was like this kid out there just pranking us. It is not something that they have all the time. It's not them scaring us. Now, could they use it to make somebody to go away? Oh yeah, because that smell can get pretty rank. But there's another side to smell too. They each have an odor that is their odor. Moma here smells very earthy, but with a floral smell. And I've had a lot of people talk about different smells when they knew that they were around. We have our own odor as well. And we know each other by that smell. We try to mask it a lot, and so we put another smell in our natural smells place, but it still says, you know, oh, that must be so-and-so because they smell like this. And you can do that with them too. All I have to do is smell Moma, and I know exactly who it is. Actually, the word paranormal is pretty much been my whole life. I don't consider anything paranormal, and with them for sure. I mean, I have a photo that of one I call the old white one. He was an old one, and he was white. I don't know that that was by age, but that's what he was. And I was in the woods one day taking pictures, and he was there. And the photo I got was one where he was transitioning from being in body to being where you couldn't see him. And a lot of people have a term for that, but it's just a change of vibration. And so in that picture, all you see is this white kind of shadow that's there. Uh, People talk all the time about they're there and they're not there, or maybe things are being moved and changed, and it's like this thing that's going to help you open up your paradigm into what's really going on in our world. I was told that we could do everything that they can do. Most of us have just forgot, but I know so many elders that still do the things that people attribute to the Bigfoot people. They're amazing in their abilities to just, now you see me, now you don't. And that happens a lot. People talk about being in their area, the place they've been to the woods so many times, and when they're there, they're totally disoriented and they get lost and they don't know how to get back to where they were. People talk about seeing them and seeing lights, or what a lot of people call orbs, that are around. I've seen that so many times. It's pretty much a normal thing. And I know lots and lots of people that have those same experiences. Now, are they the cause of those lights or orbs? No, not necessarily. There are other things that live with us that, for whatever reason, some people don't see those things. People talk about UFOs. Oh, I saw a sasquatch, and then I saw a UFO. So they have to have a connection. There has to be a connection there. Well, the connection is that there's always been UFOs around, and they've always been coming to Earth, the same as Bigfoot people have always been here and doing things, the same as so many things. If you get into Indigenous stories, it opens up this whole thing of the possibilities. Things that so many classify as myths are not myths at all. In every myth, there is some truth. And so you have to get past that. I've seen too many elders do things that people say can't be done. So how did that happen? How did those lights get there? I believe that the orbs are nothing but a change in vibration. It helps you to travel from one place to another. I was told we could do that too, if we could just remember those things that we always did before we stopped believing in what I believe our world really is. And I've talked to many elders, and when I talk about elders, I'm talking about Indigenous elders, elders from around the world, not just here in the United States. One particular story I'll tell you was when I was in high school, and I had a car, and there were some kids that we were riding around after school, and there was an Indian man that lived there in town. Everybody said he had medicine. And if you say that, it means that that person has the ability to do things. Well, that particular day, he was at the edge of town. He was going to walk home. He lived several miles outside of town, never had a car, walked everywhere. Well, I wanted to stop and pick him up and give him a ride. And the other kids were like, oh, no, no, he's got medicine. You can't do that. So we drove on the road where he would have gone to go home. You had to drive in the middle of that road because the ruts and everything else were so bad in that road. So there wasn't a car that passed me. There wasn't a car that I met on that road all the way from town, all the way to his house. When we got to his house, he was walking up on his porch. Now, how did he do that? Well, they all said he has medicine. He remembered the things that we can do. And like I said, I've talked to many, many Indigenous elders from all over that have done things. I've seen them do things. It's there. And it's not just for them to do, it's for us to begin to understand and open up. You know, a lot of people say, well, you're not offering me any proof with what you're telling me. And I've told people across the United States into Canada, anytime I've ever been speaking or been at a gathering or whatever, you don't have to believe anything I say. You really don't. I'm not trying to prove anything to you. But I would ask you to file it away. Just put it back somewhere. And then if you have an encounter, or you have somebody that you know and trust has an encounter, then you can go back to that and say, wait a minute, I heard this. So don't throw it away, just file it away. You know, I'm not here to try to teach anybody about who the Bigfoot people are, where they came from, how they are. I came into this to help people. To people who were having encounters that they didn't understand. They wanted to make some sense of it. And there are so many people out there now and that need to express this. And what we've got to do is to not say to them, that couldn't happen, or you don't know what you're talking about, or you need to give me proof that you saw this. We are people sharing our stories together, and we should have the respect for ourselves not to disrespect that person who needs to share what's been going on.